Welcome to the Gold Coast Speakers Podcast, where we have conversations so that you can learn more about a speaker, who they are, and what they talk about. My name is Xen Wilkinson, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Xen Angelides. Xen, good morning and welcome.
Morning, Glenn. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Now, you and I have had the opportunity to connect several times, and I am fascinated with your background. I'm a bodybuilder, 35 years plus in the fitness industry, involved in sales. You're also a yoga instructor. You've got an interesting background. How has this experience led you to where you are today as a leadership mindset and peak performance coach and speaker?
Thank you for that great question, Glenn. So my journey has been shaped by real life pressure in business, leadership, and personal challenges that actually forced me to grow. And in that process, I didn't just study mindset and performance, I lived it. And throughout my 35 years in the corporate sales, I really got to see exactly what was happening through that experience. And what I identified over time is I saw clear patterns. And I think that's what you sort of see when you go through the experience. You begin to study and see patterns of particular behavior from a leadership perspective. And I saw a clear pattern. So those who thrive under most aren't the most talented. I found the ones that thrived are the ones who are most disciplined. And discipline is defined by whether you feel like it or not, you know you have to do it. So from that perspective, that's what led me here to help set up Thrive Coaching Academy and to help executives unlock to find that edge when we talk about from a corporate leadership and coaching perspective. So that's how I got here, was actually through lived experience.
Can you give an example perhaps of at least one or two of those experiences that you had and how you translated that into the work that you're doing today?
So for example, when I was in sales, you had to hit KPIs on a quarterly basis, and there was so much insurmountable pressure. So at the time, I was sales director for Asia Pacific. I was managing 30 countries. I had a massive team underneath me, more than 100 people, and through the process of training. And what I found that the leader that didn't show the kind of communication in terms from an empowering point of view and making it clear cut what the direction was, I found it was quite challenging. And you're alone in a lot of sense, trying to work and weave the magic to obviously get outcomes, get the performance outcomes when the pressure's on every quarterly. And interestingly, over the period of time, I found leaders within the organization who I leaned into that were really just masterful in mentoring, coaching, and communicating. And hence I saw the difference. And that was a good example for me, how I experienced that. Now in my personal life, I'm coming up to 27 years of marriage and 33 years of being with my good wife. You start to learn that you can't just say, yes, dear, every time. There has to be a deeper level of communication, and clear communication in how you show the respect and the values, in how you align with that person. Because communication comes from the Latin word communis, which means a common in understanding. So like you're communicating to me, I'm listening. Hence, I'm communicating to you and you're listening. So that it's a two-way street in terms of understanding and not just having that internal default dialogue.
You're talking about that point of difference. So obviously leading a team of 100 people, and you could notice who were going to be successful and those who perhaps weren't. And you talked about having that discipline and that point of difference. So in your experience working with executives and leaders, what is it that you see and hear that is going to tell you, or is an indication that this person is at the top of their game?
In the most simplest way I could put it, Glenn, it's calm under pressure and clear in decision-making, consistent in their behavior. So you see that pattern. They don't just react, they actually respond. So there's a presence about them. And people feel certainty when they walk into the room. And that's not accidental, that's trained. And that's what I saw from the perspective of what makes a great leader at the top of the game, it's not just emotional intelligence, it's relationship intelligence as well, combined in how you articulate and communicate as a great leader.
So as a leadership coach, we all have the potential to achieve that. You said it's through training. We can get that skill. So you as a leadership coach, a mindset coach, and talking about peak performance, how would you take someone who has that potential to achieve that level of having that presence and that relationship quotient, not just their intelligence quotient or their emotional quotient?
I break it down to getting them to understand in being present. This is really important because if your thoughts and emotions are scattered, therefore the outcome of communication will be the same. So what we try to do is we create the outcomes so that they can take more control of their inner world with clarity and intention. And so that's stepping back and actually seeing what is happening in real time, because it's not so much the gap of knowledge, it's actually being in real time and understanding the moment to be able to respond and not react. And that's where I come in and help the coach to really look at that from not just a coaching but mentoring perspective, so then they can get better outcomes with their leaders. And therefore that filtrates throughout the culture because it stems from the top. So it all starts where it's more into the alignment and not just the theory. It's more about execution in how you do that over that period of time. I think that's important for leaders today because obviously there's a lot of pressure, uncertainty, particularly now with AI coming in. People are really starting to get jittery in terms of not knowing. Sometimes, and I learned this through yoga, is you have to embrace the unknown. You have to look at where do I sit in terms of what I need to do to make the changes to get the best outcomes.
So you talked a little bit about the inner game there, and I know that one of your favorite sayings is control the inner game to master the outer game. All right. If I was a participant in one of your events and you're on the stage, how are you going to elaborate that for me and other people in the audience?
Great question. I think everything is external. And when we look at results, relationships, performance is a reflection of what's happening internally when you look at yourself as a leader. Because I believe leadership starts at home. Leadership is not a business card or a title. It's a behavior, and it comes down to the efficiency of communication. That is something that I like to try to portray with a lot of my coaching clients and also being on stage to teach them these skills so they can get better outcomes when it's pressure. And then how do I create that calm under pressure? And again, that's coming back to, things like resetting yourself through breath, meditation, having rituals that can give you the outlets to give you the strength in order for you to be more centered in that moment. Interestingly, I did create a 5-minute reset playbook, which is on my website, and I use it for my executive teams. And I've got an executive team who have just gone on to the 5-minute reset, and it's basically a playbook, a practical playbook for regaining clarity and calm under control in real life under pressure. And it's a simple micro-learning online course. Doesn't take very long, but it at least gives people the tools to really help them to not only control that inner game, but master the outer game. And there's a lot more depth in terms of understanding as a leader. You need to be aligned with your culture, with your values, everything that you pretty much set the benchmark and the height.
So take me through, because I know we're also working with some clients, a lot of audiences, especially at senior leaders, they're like, well, just give me the skinny, give me the one thing that's going to work. Tell me right now, take me through part of that 5-minute reset. What is it that's something that you might do with an audience or even with me right now?
So I've come up with it's very simple. It's a simple, what I call 10-second filter. You can do it right now in real time, because what happens is in that 10-second filter, you need to understand that before you speak, does this need to be said? And that's the first question. Yep. The second is, does it need to be said now? The third, can I say it in one clear sentence? And then I teach that in the 5-minute reset. So that last one to me is everything, because when you think about in real time, because if you can't say it clearly, you're not ready to say it.
So the first one is, does this need to be said? And so that gets me to start thinking, am I adding value by saying this right now?
Fact. And so therefore, what happens is it's not rushed communication. And that's the core problem. Because if the internal dialogue state is frustrated, defensive, or they're not listening to me. And this can happen in personal life. It's actually understanding the moment. So then that's where the 5-minute reset comes in, which teaches you a lot about breath work, knowing how to take control of the moment so you can be calm and present, not reactive, but respond. I suppose that's the short version, but obviously there's more depth to that. But if someone can do a 10-second filter in that moment, it can help you without actually automatically going into that default.
Interesting. I like it. It's just 3 questions that you need to ask yourself in that moment. Now, we often talk about 3 things, and the other day we were talking and you mentioned another 3 things about leadership. You talked about authenticity, spontaneity, and presence for leaders. So when you're on a stage and you're talking to an audience, what message do you want to deliver to them about those 3 things: authenticity, spontaneity, and presence?
And if I may say so, I was taught that by an incredible mentor and coach when I was in the US after his presentation, Danilo Cubain, who's also the president of North Carolina University. He finished the presentation, and then after the presentation, I was really inspired by him. And I asked him the question, the seminar's finished. I'm not rushing to my next one. What's some nuggets you can give to me right now? This was 2003. I was in Irvine, LA. There was 5,000 speakers there, and everyone's rushing off, and I'm just here one-on-one with Nito, and he said, Xen, I'm going to give it to you right now, and it's interesting that you stayed back to ask me this. So he mentioned to me at the time, people don't follow perfection. They follow the truth. So authenticity builds trust. That's what I was taught. That's what we mean by authenticity. Spontaneity shows confidence. The person you are, who you stand for, not what you prejudge or you think that leader is or what their background. It's more about how they stand with confidence on the stage. And then the presence creates connection. And so when a leader embodies all these 3, they don't need attention, they command it naturally. That's what he told me after the seminar in 2003, and I never forgotten that. And it's not to say that structure isn't important in a presentation. There's so much information about the importance of structure, but sometimes you need to be authentic. And it also means you need to be vulnerable. And that's how we connect with other human beings. That's how we can relate to other human beings. So that's what I mean by authenticity, spontaneity, and presence, because I think as a leader, if you have that on stage, you naturally command that and you feel it. The person's got aura. The person's like, wow. And there's some amazing speakers on the planet who actually show that. So I like to embody those components on the stage when I do presentations, because it's like, it's not always just the script. It's actually being present and seeing what's happening in real time. Yeah.
So you're actually emulating, you are doing that yourself. You're being the role model to your audience and to the leaders that you're coaching.
Yes. I'll give you another side example. I teach hot yoga. People come into my class and I know they've had a challenging day, or what we call character building days. So my intention before I go into the yoga room, it's not about me, it's all about them. And then my focus is to change their state in 60 minutes. So that's just an example of why it's important that when you go into a room, you have to command the presence naturally, not just getting the attention. And I think this is really important. And if you're a speaker out there, I highly recommend these attributes, because sometimes you can just throw the structure away. I'm not saying it's not important, but people come to see you. And with me, you see what you see is what you get.
So what I'm hearing then is how you are on the stage is also how you are in real life.
Yeah.
You're bringing that authenticity, the spontaneity, and the presence. That there's no difference between Xen the dog dad, the fitness guy, yoga teacher, to Zen, the speaker on the stage.
You're seeing that consistent pattern of what I stand for. It's like funny. I had a member from the yoga studio said, "Zen, are you that optimistic 24/7?" And I said, "Hell no." But my ability to self-correct using the tools that I've learned through my personal development journey is how I realign myself. And I do have challenging, tough moments. You're not always going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. The gift is, and I learned this from my good mother when I was 5 years old, always look for the good in people, Zen, and bring the best out in them. And that's always been my elementary existence and intention. There's no deviation. There's got to be something not right with Zen. Oh my God, is he, what's going on? There isn't. I'm pretty clear cut. And what you see is what you get. And I felt that with our connection too, Glenn. And I think that's important because, when we look at the world today, it's changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years, and we're constantly evolving as human beings. We're not human doing, we're human beings. We're meant to evolve. And so this is also an important factor that I found that has helped me to be able to culminate, to bring all these skill sets and tools where I take a more of a holistic approach in how I can help my clients, or at least get 3 key messages on stage for people to take away and put into action. And I think that's important.
Thanks, Anne. I've also heard you say, and this is a connection to what you just said earlier about handling specific moments or being present in that moment. And I've heard you say, you don't need more information, you need to handle specific moments better. What do you mean by that? And how does that translate into someone who's a leader and they want to improve those 3 things of authenticity, presence, and spontaneity?
Yeah. Most leaders already know what to do. So we have to look at the facts, right? The gap isn't their knowledge. It's the execution under pressure. And that's what I mean by you don't need more information. It's getting more understanding of where you're at. It's how you show up in the critical moments. For example, a tough conversation with another executive, okay? A high stakes decision. How do you handle that? A setback. A setback is designed for a comeback. So when you master these moments, everything changes. And that's what I mean by that. Because I think people have the knowledge, there's already enough information. It's how do you master those moments? And again, that's coming back to how you reset, not react, respond. If it's a really key decision and a high stakes decision, I say to my executive, listen, thank you for that. I need to process it. I'll come back to you. And take time to process exactly what the unequivocal decision. That's going to vary depending on how important that decision is. And in business today, that's critical. You want to be making the right decisions because a lot of the times we're rushing, it's rushed communication, we're making hasty decisions. Yes, we all talk about risk versus reward, but you need to understand sometimes it's got to be a calculated risk and get a deeper understanding in how you manage that moment in order to be able to get the best outcome. And so it's a win-win, not win-lose. So that's what I mean by that.
And so you and I both know that when we're coaching an executive, quite often it's not a lack of information. They're overburdened with information. They've got so much data, so much input that it's trying to help them to sift through all of that and then, as you say, to manage that moment better. And it's when sometimes that information just gives them too much pressure. And perhaps it's the pressure of time. Yeah. Okay. Nice. So of all the audiences that you've spoken to and the people that you've coached, what's one time where you've seen this really shine? Have you got that one example where you can say, there was on that day with this person and they listened to me and then they took off? Have you got an example where you can let us know how you have actually seen it happen in real time?
Yeah, I've worked recently with a senior leader who had all the strategy and all the knowledge, but avoided the difficult conversations. And so this is a good example because it can happen because sometimes we get too attached emotionally, if that makes sense. And then once we trained that person to stay more present, imposed in their moments, his entire leadership shifted into the team, meaning that the team respected him more, performance lifted and the culture transformed. So what happened was that one moment was handled differently. And when you do that, that changes everything. So that's probably an example I can give to you in a high stakes conversation where if the team's not delivering based on performance and KPIs and acumen, you need to step back. And again, this is where the authentic leader comes in, who has a deeper understanding. To be more persuasive and influential, you have to make that connection. And the only way it can be done is by you being present, you listening and actually listening to the challenges and then processing and then coming back with clear decisions and knowing exactly how to handle the situation. Obviously, that's the best example because I think what happens is we all get very bombarded with so much pressure and overwhelm.
And we get caught up.
And I think we get caught
Yeah.
up. Yeah, we get caught up. And this is
Yeah.
where I think people end up compromising their values and they burn out if they're not careful. Well, actually, in America, they call it quiet cracking. That is the term they use for burnout. Quiet cracking. So over a period of time, the accumulation of burnout, you will crack if you're not careful, meaning you'll lose sight or you come out frustrated and communication breaks down and then the cycle repeats. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Quiet cracking. I'll have to remember that one. So you talked about that quiet cracking, which over a period of time leads to the burnout. And that's a real thing for some leaders and their teams in organizations. But you and I, we focus on coaching and speaking about high performance. How would a leader or an executive know that they're getting that balance right? How can they be or maintain that peak performance without tipping over into the burnout? And then also not passing that on to their team. How do we get that right?
Well, we know that high performance isn't about doing more. It's about managing energy and focus. And I think that's the most important fundamental, I believe, that I've learned through my experience. And my good maths teacher once taught me focus is significantly more important than intelligence. The question is, what are you focused on? And you're the only person that can answer that question. So how you manage and focus your energy. So the best leaders know when to push and when to recover. It's a bit like the old Goldilocks effect, not too hard, not too soft. It's the push and pull system that we need to learn from a leadership perspective in knowing how to manage these moments. So therefore, the best leaders create boundaries. They stay aligned to their purpose and they don't sacrifice themselves for success. This is a big one because you need to understand that consistency and sustainable performance over a period of time wins. It's the cumulative effect of the small efforts that you put in over a period of time that creates the big wins. And so that's why for myself, I have a deliberate rhythm of routine and rituals every morning. I wake up 3:45, 5 things I'm grateful for. Then I do my 10-minute meditation, just some simple breathing reset. Doesn't take a lot of time. And then I look at my goals, get myself in a really good state. So therefore, when I go to work with clients one-on-one or a group dynamic facilitation or a speaking engagement, I've set the benchmark and the height in terms of the energy and focus that I like to bring to the table. That to me is what makes great leaders, because a great leader, and I think Barack Obama once said this, the size of your leadership is defined by the size of your problems you can handle. And a problem is a disguise of an opportunity. And as a leader, you need to be able to see past that. You need to show other people what they can't see. So you've got to turn, visible to the invisible in that moment. So that's why it's important to really look at that from that perspective. And then that therefore helps leaders, to manage and not get to that level of burnout.
We've talked a lot about work and performance, and just then you touched on having the rituals, the breathing, the meditation. And I know that this is a very important part of you, and you have that spiritual side. Again, I'm a little skeptical because I know that sometimes my clients and your clients might push back and say, I don't have time to do deep breathing and meditation. I'm in the moment. I'm making those decisions. I'm in the business. I'm in the negotiation. So How can we help leaders incorporate that better into their work life?
Great question. And I think from a spiritual perspective, I'm not talking woo-woo or kumbaya, and I've been teaching yoga 10 years. I sort of very focused on a grounded level to teach leaders the tools, but what's important for me, it's about your awareness and connection, and how do you transfer that energy and focus. So taking time to even just slow down, take a deep breath, reflect. And this helps you stay grounded. So this is really important. So I bring that into my work by helping clients become more conscious of their thoughts, their patterns, and their impact. That's what I do from a holistic point of view to make them more conscious. For example, in yoga, I'm consciously breathing in now. I'm consciously exhaling now. So you create that conscious awareness. And when you do that, you lead from a place where performance becomes more meaningful, not just measurable. I think that's important for a leader. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I'm not as focused on that as you. I'm more of a realist and let's deal with the issues. But I also agree. I definitely agree with you because it has worked for me and I have seen it work for other people. And that's why I enjoy talking to you, because then that's also helping me to have that better awareness in the moment. How am I breathing? How am I dealing with this stress? I'm going to approach this negotiation.
Correct. More grounded. And that's why I came up with the 5-minute reset, because it's simple. It's a practical tool. It's more to do in real time when you're under enormous pressure. We know that it's important for you to stay calm under pressure. It's no different in your personal life. If you have children, which can be challenging, how do you handle those conversations?
Yes.
You have to lead by example. You are their teacher. You are their mentor. They become a byproduct of your leadership and behavior. So leadership starts at home.
Yes.
And how that
Oh,
transfers in the real world is so important. So I think there's a cumulative effect that if you do look at it from a spiritual perspective, it's more from a personal development perspective. That's my interpretation.
So Xen, we've talked a lot about peak performance, leadership, coaching, being present, being in the moment. As a speaker, you always want an audience to take away something from whatever you're presenting. What are the top 3 things that you would like your audience to take away from listening to you?
Number 1, be yourself. No one is a copy of anyone. Everyone's a unique human being. Just be yourself. That's number 1. The second, personal development to me is life-changing. It's so important to continuously become a student of learning and continuously studying and upskilling, especially in this day and age, how things are changing so fast. I really recommend for people to really work towards putting more energy and focus in that realm of personal development. And the third thing is you need to understand how to communicate as an effective leader. And that's something that I do for myself, but also teach it to my clients. Because for you to be persuasive and influential, you need to master that connection. And that comes back to your values, your integrity, your truth. And that's really important. If you can take those 3 things away and put them into practice, you will see a significant shift.
Wonderful. Thank you, Xen, and thank you for joining us today at the Gold Coast Speakers Podcast. If you would like to have Xen speak at your next event here on the Gold Coast or anywhere in Australia, then go to goldcoastspeakers.com.au to find his contact details. You'll find Xen and many more amazing Gold Coast-based speakers there. Xen, thank you again for being my guest on Gold Coast Speakers Podcast, and I hope to catch up with you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. See you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Gold Coast Speakers Podcast. If you loved this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're looking for your next speaker, or even ready to step onto more stages yourself, you know where to find us. goldcoastspeakers.com.au. I'm JJ Person-Jones, founder of Gold Coast Speakers. And until next time, keep showing up, keep showing your voice, and making waves.